Hey everyone, welcome back to CP Whiskey Creek in nscale. I'm Chris, and this video is going to be the February and March layout update, but really it's just for the last 2 months been focusing on this river scene. So if you remember from the January update, I had to rip out the center pier area here and this whole little island and redo all that. But let's see how we go from this to this. So at first I put down a layer of glue, and this is where I want a dirt path, like a little dirt road to go down. And just using some grout, I was able to create this little path area. If you remember my vacuum review, this is my attempt of using the garbage vacuum from Costco to try to clean up the area. When it worked, but most of the time it didn't work. But it was good enough to be able to at least clean up all the spare grout from that area. Then I laid down some fine turf, like grass, and some like burnt grass, just a couple different layers to just sort of fill in some of the other areas that aren't part of the dirt path, and just try to sweep everything into all the mess from the glue, trying to just sort of layer up the scenery area. As part of all this, then what I wanted to do is leading into the area where the city is, I wanted to start building up some of that scenery and sort of connect that, because going around that bend around to the right is where the station is, and it will really bring out the scenery of the river scene as you come around that bend and actually have some scenery in that area, and sort of ties everything together. Eventually I'm going to get back to doing a lot more in the city area. There's a couple more buildings I want to get, but this just sort of helps bring some of the scenic aspects of the layout together. For the next step, once all the grass layer is down, then was the interesting task of trying to ballast the Kato Unitrak, especially since it's already fairly sloped, and I mean it's got kind of a fake ballast to it, but it still isn't very realistic. So I laid down a bead of glue and I kind of created my own little mixture of ballast. It's all using the woodland scenic stuff, but I found just one color by itself is not really seem as realistic, especially for Southern Ontario. So I was able to mix together my own and lay that down. And then to seal everything in, then I gave it a spray of, this is a mixture of rubbing alcohol and water, and that just sort of helps break the surface tension. So I sprayed that down with a little mister from the dollar store, and then this is a 50-50 mix of glue and water, and just using a little eyedropper, then lay that down, and it sort of helps spreads out on its own, and really ties everything together, especially now since the ballast is not just on the bead of glue that I put on the sides. So this just sort of helps, and I'm going to end up doing several layers of this stuff. So there's lots of glue. This thing is not going anywhere. So I put down lots of glue across all parts of the ballast and the scenic grass along here, and really starts giving this some scenic detail that it needs. So I turned my attention back to the actual river area, and I found that the shoreline, it was just very harsh. I wasn't able to really create this feathering look that I feel like that you see on a regular basis out in the water and everything. So what I decided to do is turn to an airbrush. And since it's inside the house, and I wasn't able to drag in a air compressor on the inside, so I had a couple of these Testors airbrush propellant cans around, and they work okay. The one thing that I find with them is you can't control any of the air pressure or anything like that, so whatever it comes out as is what it comes out. And the other thing is that they kind of lose their pressure very quickly, and they turn extremely cold. So I had to stop several times and then take the can and actually put it back into a bucket full of hot water, and that allowed it to repressurize itself, because you just sort of lose the pressure and it just stops working. So I played around with this. These are not very good. I'm sure they're terrible for your health. One thing that I found is I found an old can first and tried to use that up. And when I started spraying it, then I had it almost had like a mustard smell to it, and I had like burning eyes and burning throat. And when I googled it later on, then it I basically mustard gassed myself. So you really have to be careful using this stuff. Um, so I'm glad I was able to finally use them up, and they're no longer in my house, and I no longer have to worry about them. And I think they really sort of created that feathered um, transition from for the shoreline for the river area. So it did the effect that I wanted to do, but it definitely came with a lot of health concerns. So I wouldn't suggest them. I then turned my attention back to the little transition area where the city is, and transitioning from the river to the station area. And I wanted to try my hands using the static grass applicator. So at first, I had created my own quite a while ago. I've used it a couple times. I've never been overly thrilled with how it worked out, but it's always been good enough. So I wanted to try that again. I actually ended up getting a, I don't know if it's considered a real static grass applicator, but I got one for Christmas probably 2 years ago, and I hadn't broken that out yet. But later on in this project, I finally got that out and started using that, and I'll probably do up a review video on that one, because it definitely worked a lot better than my homemade one that I made from a bug zapper and a strainer. So that's what I use for this part of the project, and it worked good enough, but um, results do vary 100%. By this time, having given up on that Costco garbage that I had bought for a vacuum, I turned back to my rigid shop vac and just put a thing of pantyhose over top of the end to help collect all the stuff, and just use that to be able to vacuum up everything. It was mildly awkward to go into the dollar store and buy pantyhose. Luckily, my wife was with me, and she was able to consult on the ideal one that I would need to use for, of course, model railroading purposes. So it worked quite well, as you can see when I empty out the pantyhose at the end, and it really picked up everything even more than I expected. So that did exactly what I was hoping it would do. After creating all these multiple layers, it really started bringing the area to life, and now turn to the next stage of being able to install some trees, because that's really going to bring out the scenery of this area. And because of the mixture that I use, all the plaster and everything to be able to build up the scenery, it was a little bit harder to just sort of poke a hole with an awl or anything like that. So I actually had to turn to my drill to be able to drill, and I use I forget the size of the bit, but I used the smallest bit that I had to be able to drill small little holes, and that certainly works. It's just not ideal if there's tight areas that you need to get into, but I use that to be able to drill some holes into the scenery. And once I did that, then a little plop of glue into the hole, and hopefully that tree is not going to go anywhere. And I was able to use a mixture of different trees. The first one that I put down here was one of those dollar store Christmas trees that I love to pick up on sale from the dollar store and then repaint and redo. And another one was one that I had made from a jig that I have, and then there's some of the Amazon ones, and then eventually those are all good background ones, and then I sort of worked my way progressively into some of the scenic trees, super trees, sorry, that I had been working on also throughout this month. I certainly found by adding the trees in there, it gave a new level and a new dimension to the layout. So it brought out a lot more of the scenery, and some of the oopsies even on static grass got hidden away. The one thing that I did find with the trees though is I still had sort of sky in the background, and the way that I had used the photo backdrop, there's some gaps there that weren't very natural. So what I ended up doing is using a scour pad, and I cut that to a size to be able to hide behind the the scenery there and to sort of blend in the scenery with the photo backdrop. And once I cut that down to what I thought was the right size, then I took that out to my shop, and because that's where I've been doing a lot of my tree making stuff, and basically treated it the same way as the super tree. So I coated it in glue and put a whole bunch of ground foam over top of that, and I ended up actually doing a couple layers of that just to have a little bit of a dimension to it and some colors and shades and what have you. So I did that, and once I installed them back in, and it really, took away from that fakeness that I found that I was seeing, and it sort of brought a little bit more natural depth to the layout that I was hoping for. The last stage was the water. Now, I didn't want to do a resin pour, so I channeled my inner Boomer diorama and went to some Golden products to mix those. Now, Boomer uses a product called GAC 500. Apparently that's been discontinued, so I couldn't use that. So a little bit of Google and AI work, and I went with the gloss medium and mixed that with the soft gel gloss. So I mixed those together in kind of a 50-50 mixture. I think that's kind of what Boomer does as well. And what I started with is cutting in on the shoreline and sort of doing that area, and then just went to town on the rest of the river area. I am very happy with the end result. It's exactly what I had pictured and was envisioning for the area. I ended up actually putting a second coat of just the gloss medium over top just to give it a little bit more glossiness to it, and I watered that down a little bit, and like I said, this is exactly what I was looking for, and without having any worries about using any of the stinky resins or mixing any of that stuff. So there you have it. Thanks for checking in on how my progress has been with the layout over the last 2 months. Really happy with the results, and it's been an area that's really held me back from progressing scenic wise, but now that is behind me and time to get the bridge back on and get some trains running again. So once again, thanks for watching and have yourself a great day.